Hey everyone, I'm David Aragona, and this is the October 12th edition of Horses to Watch, where we analyze trips from the last week, looking for horses that encountered adversity and could be worth betting back when they run back in the future. This week, I'm taking a look at three races from last weekend at Aqueduct, all of them turf races. Two of them actually graded stakes events that feature some pretty nice horses, but I'm going to highlight horses that finished a little farther back in the pack of those races, as well as the other non stakes event that I'm going to talk about from late in the day on Saturday. But I've got two replays from Saturday's October 8th card at Aqueduct to talk about. So let's first begin with race six. It's the grade three matron stakes for 2-year-old fillies. This one going 6 furlongs on the outer turf course. And I want to focus on the number 8, Personal Pursuit. Let's break these runners from the starting gate. And she breaks towards the back of the pack. You can see her. She's that gray filly with the black and white silks. And the reason that she breaks slowly, if you go watch the head on for yourself, is that the number 10 in this race veered in sharply to the left coming out of the starting gate. And she basically knocked right into the number 9, Sweet Lou's Got Aces, who in turn knocked into the number 8, Personal Pursuit, who just got completely hit off stride at the start of this race. And that's why she lost so much momentum coming out of the starting gate and was so far back in the early going. This filly actually showed a lot more speed in her prior start when she had broken her maiden in an off the turf race. This matron was her first start on the turf, and I think she shows that she handles it pretty well. The trip just doesn't work out for her. You can see even here, she's still towards the back of the pack on the rail, and Junior Alvarado, you can tell, has a handful of horse underneath him, but just nowhere to go at the top of the stretch. Even here, she's throwing her head about a little bit, trying to find a path to run. He finally angles her back towards the inside, and she's going to do some decent finishing in this race to pass about half the field to ultimately finish 5th. This wasn't a race that featured a particularly fast or slow pace. It was a pretty even gallop the entire way, but the winner did track the pace pretty closely. A big long shot won this race, 47-1 American Apple. But even though a big long shot won, it came up a relatively fast race. 87 buyer for the winner. I think the time from US number was a 106. So Personal Pursuit earned a buyer number in the low 70s, a solid figure, despite the fact that she was off so slowly at the beginning of the race. I do think that she showed enough turf ability to suggest that she is ultimately going to be more of a turf horse. We'll see if sprinting is going to be her gig moving forward. She is by Tappet, so she has a right to step forward in route races. But I think she did show some subtle turf ability here, and it's one that you might want it back when she gets another chance on turf, likely in her next career start. Let's take a look at another race from that Saturday, October 8th card. This is a non-stakes event. It's a New York bred allowance, non-winners of one other than, going 1.16 miles on the outer turf course at Aqueduct, race 10. Let's break these runners from the starting gate, and I want to focus on the number 9, Lady of Thornton. Now, this was the first turf start for her since late July at Saratoga, but she actually run pretty well at a big price to be, I think, second or third that day. But things don't go so well when she gets back on the turf here. You can see that's her, the number 9, towards the back of the pack, and she is throwing her head about, just really resenting the restraint of her rider, Jorge Vargas. And this is just the textbook example of a horse that is way too rank. I mean, she is really fighting him. As you could see, her head is continually going up in the air. That's just a sign that a horse is not wanting to run faster, not liking the speed that her jockey is asking her to race at. She wants to do more than she's being allowed to do. And this is also a horse that does typically do running from the back of the pack. So it's not like she's out of position, but the pace of this race was pretty moderate to on the slow side. Some horses that were successful were a little bit closer to the pace. The eventual winner is the number 4, Shizamiya. And given how ranked she was, I understand what Jorge Vargas does here. He allows her to run up outside of horses a little bit, hoping that if he allows her to exert some of that energy, maybe she's going to settle down a little bit. And she does to a certain extent, but when you do that, then you're forced to race wide around the far turn. And you can see here, she is racing in the 3 path. It's going to get worse. She's going to be pushed out into the 4 path to 5 path as she tries to make a run as they come to the top of the stretch here. She ultimately only is going to pass one horse as they come onto the wire. I think she finishes second to last in this race, but just given the trip that she got, you can see there going wide at the top of the stretch, the fact that she fought her rider so much at the start of this race, I think you really can make some excuses for Lady of Thornton's regression, getting back on the turf here. She really is much more of a grass filly. I mean, she had run all of her best races previously on the turf. She was coming in off a couple of off the turf events where she was forced to run on the main track. So her form was dirtied up coming in here. I think it's further dirtied up after she got the kind of trip that she did last Saturday. So she's one that if she gets another start on the turf before the end of turf season in New York, I think she can be much more successful, maybe at a slightly lower level against Claiming Company. But even if she comes back against allowance horses, I think she ran a lot better than it looks in this last race, and maybe she can be competitive once again. Let's move on to a race from Sunday's card at Aqueduct. This was October 9th, race 9, one of the future races this day. It was the Grade 3 Knickerbocker going 1.125 miles on the inner turf course for older horses. Let's break these runners from the gate, and they're going to break out of that chute on the inner turf course, kind of coming right at you into the stretch as they make that sort of half turn to get into the main straightaway. Let's focus on the number 3, Dyna Drive. He is the horse with those pink silks towards the back of the pack. And this is a situation where there were two things working against Dyna Drive. One was just the nature of the turf course this past week at Aqueduct. The rails had been set back to 0 feet on the inner turf course, and horses that saved ground really seemed to have an advantage on this course on multiple days. I wouldn't say it was the biggest gold rail that we've ever seen on the turf, but there were enough winners that seemed to really be energized by racing on the inside path that was certainly the place to be. And Dyna Drive just never saves any ground in this race, racing in the 2 to 3 to 4 path throughout his entire trip. Furthermore, there was just no pace on in this race. You can see the opening quarter went up in 25-1. That is just walking for these horses, an extremely slow pace set by that long shot King Cause, and he will be the ultimate winner of this race. And this is just one of those that is a total merry-go-round. Nobody does any closing in this race. The horses that you see 1, 2, 3 right now, King Cause, Safe Conduct, and Pixelate, they're going to finish basically in that order, with Pixelate just edging out Safe Conduct for second at the end, but they comprise the entire trifecta in this race. And a horse like Dyna Drive, who still is in last place right now in those pink silks, is just never going to have any chance to make up that kind of ground when the winners are basically sprinting to the wire. Nobody's going to change position in the stretch of this race. You'll be able to see, and there's Dyna Drive coming widest into the stretch of anybody, so he's losing ground there. I looked at the Trackist numbers for this race. Dyna Drive covered 49 more feet as he lost ground on the turns than the winner of this race, King Cause, who saved ground around both turns. And you can see that early leader is just going to spurt away at the end. Dyna Drive doesn't finish that far out of second or third place in here, only about 2 lengths behind the second place finished Pixelate, but just had way too much ground to make up at the end here. So he ends up finishing, I think, 9th of 10, but I do think he ran a lot better than that dismal finish would suggest. He's a horse that I think is a little dirtied up now because he's also somewhat against the pace and track profile in his prior start when he didn't get to make a run in the Bernard Baruch at Saratoga over a turf course that had taken some rain. He had been in great form prior to that, and I think if he can get into a more favorable situation next time, he's a horse that can rebound to some of those better efforts that we saw from him earlier in the summer. So those are all the horses to watch for this week. If you want to follow these horses moving forward, just add them to a horse watch on DRF.com and get email notifications when these horses run back in the future. Thanks for tuning in this week, and make sure to catch future episodes of Horses to Watch on upcoming Wednesdays.